Thank you, David, for joining us. I, I I noticed your the commission survey that you did on behalf of Music Canada. So I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions and see how the results from the survey can support the music industry and musicians and what have you. So could you start by sharing some of the main points you discovered from the survey?
So I think the survey was really meant to understand how Canadians were, reacting to the pandemic through the lens of music, in particular, their willingness to venture back out and watch live music in a number of different types of venues. What we learned was first that music has been a real source of comfort for Canadians during this difficult period. Millions were reporting that music was helping relieve stress. Almost half of Canadians said that they were discovering new music during the pandemic, that their use of digital streaming, live streamed concerts, recorded concerts, online were all up across a number of areas. So there was a real sense that music was an important part of getting through this difficult time. But we also wanted to understand, as people move out of the physical distancing restrictions that have been in place, when are they going to feel comfortable, and under what conditions are they going to feel comfortable going back to live music events, whether that's music festivals, going down to a pub or a bar to watch a live concert, going to a large or small venue. And what we learned was that there's, at least as a starting point, a lot of hesitation among Canadians to do that. We see this, regardless of what kind of venue we test or how people might interact. So for many Canadians, at the time we did this survey, they said it's going to take, 6 months or more before they're going to think they're going to feel comfortable going back to these kinds of venues. For many others, they may not feel comfortable until there's a vaccine. And so the real insight to all of this is that, the music industry in Canada, whether you're an artist, whether you are a technician, whether you work at these venues, are likely going to face longer term challenges in making concert goers feel comfortable again. And that is the primary objective, is finding a way to make concert goers feel comfortable, given that they are still quite worried about being close to people, and the risk of infection is still there.
Okay, and thank you very much. I think that's a great point that could help both the music industry to respond, and also different levels of government, as different levels of government also support the music industry. Was there one thing in particular that uh, uh, you were shocked about in terms of the results?
Well, I think the thing that really stands out to me, we segmented the sample into different groups of Canadians based on how they normally or regularly go to live music. And so we identified this one group called the live music lovers. About 1 out of 4 Canadians fall into that group. And they're people who told us before the pandemic they would regularly go to live music events, whether at a bar or pub, whether at a concert, music festival, you name it, they really like it. And even among this group, those that are most engaged in the sector, who love the experience, who crave it in a way, large numbers of them were saying, it's going to take some time before they feel comfortable going again. And I think that underscores to me the level of concern that consumers are going to be facing. So that's the first one. The other really surprising finding that has a lot of people paying attention to is the result when it came to willingness to fly or go to the United States to see a concert, right? The number was way higher among all groups who said, I'm not sure I'm going to be comfortable going anytime soon or maybe ever again to the US. And I think that's a reflection on how we perceive the risk right now and maybe into the future of traveling to the United States, and the difference in how they're dealing with the pandemic down there and its impact on tourism, on travel, and on the music sector in the US. So those two to me stand out as both most relevant, I think, but also the most surprising in terms of just how widespread that concern was.
Hmm. Yeah, that was very shocking. I mean, I also think the other thing was uh, uh, the music goers or the music supporters. They know the importance of music psychologically and socially, but even within that knowing, they're still hesitant in terms of supporting music in a public space per se at live venues. So that was very very surprising to me as well. Um, the other question that I wanted to ask you, and you may or may not be able to answer this question, and maybe it's more for Music Canada, is how can this data be used to support the music industry? Here I'm talking about musicians, festivals, live venues,
Yeah.
music labels, and the whole gamut.
Well, I think, I think Music Canada is using it to help support the industry, to bring a spotlight on the challenges that are going to be faced going forward, in particular to public policymakers, right? What we know is that music is part of the fabric of our lives. It's part of our cultural heritage. It's what makes us feel good. We're going to be doing some other work with them to explore how this is affecting artists in particular. So that will be coming out in the next few weeks.
Great.
But this gives us an insight into the consumer side of it. And if this hesitation to venture back out and experience live music again persists for a long period of time, then the public policy response the governments are going to have to deliver in terms of support for this sector. Because if there are no live concerts, then artists and those who work in the sector are going to be faced with no income for a very long time. And the long-term impact of that, in my mind, is not just how that affects people in the short term before this crisis is over, but on the long-term development of the sector in Canada. And the importance of particularly small venues to so much of this industry, I think is critical. So I do think that, if you're an advocate for this sector, whether you're Music Canada, whether you're the live music industry, whether you're an artist, I think reflecting on these results, realizing that they are likely the worst case scenario. And I suspect as more and more people get comfortable with the new world we're living in, we will find ways of getting them back to concerts when we're able to do it. But it does demonstrate that government should have a role to play in supporting artists, excuse me, and making sure that whenever this new normal world comes back, that Canadian music is strong and our artists are still able to do what they love to do and what makes so many Canadians happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Here in Hamilton, one of our iconic music venues shut down recently, and now there's limited number of live music venues here in Hamilton. And I know even the current live venues are also trying to figure out what to do in terms of paying insurance costs, business licensing, and what have you. So yeah, that point is well taken. I think I have two more questions. The next one is,
Sure.
I know that the survey touched upon the accessing of music and uh, music related content on a digital platform, right? So the streaming, the YouTubing, and all of that stuff. Um, music and the digital sphere they've always had like a strange relationship in terms of royalties and payments for musicians. So what does this mean looking forward in terms of the relationship between music and musicians and the digital world? Right now you're seeing
Yeah.
people do performances on Instagram, Facebook Live, etc. So what
Like I can't speak to the relationship between musicians and those platforms, but I know it's an ongoing one, and it's at times not the most positive, and I think there's work to be. But what I can speak to is we had seen this happening before the pandemic. So what I've been saying about the behavior that we're going to see changed as a result are likely going to be just an acceleration of the trends we'd already seen, which was an increased digitization of our lives, right? Did what I call digital first. So regardless of how old you are before the pandemic, you were probably streaming music. We saw an increase in, for some, in sort of a niche market for, vinyl and records, and the return of kind of that nostalgic feel and the sound that people really appreciate from those types of modes. But primarily, most people are consuming music content, whether video or audio, through a stream. And so what our research shows is that over this pandemic, because people have not had an alternative, that they have been looking to digital content. And in the period where which they're going to feel uncomfortable going to live music, it is a platform to reach people. It's harder, I think, because discovery is different. Algorithms can limit people's access. Finding music that you may not know you like, but then realize you do, is hard. Than just going to a bar or a venue and exploring and being exposed, even at a music festival. You're exposed to music you may not ever have thought you'd listen to, but because you're there, you're going to listen, and that might create an appreciation. So I do think it's going to create the impetus for the artists and those who build and maintain these platforms to think about that relationship a little bit. But what we also learned is I think that, most people almost half of Canadians said that they had consumed some form of digital music that was streamed in a way that they didn't before. Most were satisfied with, for example, a live stream of a concert, or an artist in his basement or her basement playing and watching that on Facebook, let's say. They were satisfied with it generally, but almost everybody said it doesn't replace the real thing. It can't replace what it feels like to go to a concert, to be crammed together in a room. And the reason is, when we look at those who particularly love going to music, most of them say, I love that feeling of, being crammed together, of the energy that a live concert brings. I love the socializing that I get to do. I love the fact that I get to meet new people. There's an energy that you get when you're at a concert that you can't get watching something on a big screen or a small screen. And I think that's the hopefulness here, that if we can get through this difficult period, I think that the data suggests to me that people will not ultimately replace the live experience with a digital one. They'll seek to augment. Maybe they will replace in a temporary period, but long term, if you love live music today, I think you're going to love live music whenever you can go back and see it comfortably, because there's something about it that is different. And we see that in a whole other, in a range of other fields, right? Whether that's live theater, whether that's live sports, right? There's something different to going to a Raptors game live than watching it on TV. And so even if they're broadcasting the rest of the season starting whenever, you're still going to there's still people who are going to want to watch that game when they're able to back in live. So live matters, but I think that we're going to see the increased importance of digital as a way to disseminate content to people, because that's just where we're going to be and where we are.
This is very, like, I think the results from this survey are much needed and can inform both consumers and producers and government to come up with creative ways to support the music industry. So I really thank you for your work and the results. The last question is going to be a difficult one. I know most of the work that Abacus does is deals with political stuff and political insights. And I've noticed, I believe you did some work prior to the federal election about affordability. And so the last question that I have for you is connected in terms of, at least in your capacity, what can you say about affordability in terms of internet and providing a platform for these digitization content, right? because eventually all of these have to come together, and you can't separate them in chunks. So what does the data tell you, and what does your prior experience in terms of looking at affordability? How do you see them connecting?
Well, I think what this pandemic has taught us all is how essential a high-speed internet connection is. We're seeing it in the world of work as more and more people are going to end up working from home. If you're a student, I teach at Carleton University in Ottawa. At the final months of the semester, we were doing it all digital. And I think in the fall, they're going to be completely remote. So if you don't have a high-speed internet connection, that's going to mean access issues and your ability to actually take part. So I do think that the digital divide, as we call it, will be even, the spotlight on it will be even greater, and the importance of closing it, whether that's those who live in rural parts of the country or remote who don't have access to the same kind of high-speed internet that I have. So it's a geography question. But as you said, it's also an income question. It's also an affordability question. And so I think policymakers in Ottawa, frankly, are well aware of this, that you can't move the country to a place where you talk about high tech and you talk about, digital first economy and not have everybody being able to take part in it. And so that applies to music as well. And it applies to any content that people want access to. And so I think we're going to see that conversation continue to develop. I think you raise a really good point. And I think whether you're a telecom provider, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're somebody who needs access, this debate will be one of the legacies, I think, of the pandemic because of how reliant we've become, all of us, on having a good high-speed internet connection.
Yeah, I mean, the most definitely, I think accessibility, affordability, all these things come into play. So yes, David, thank you very much. I believe the first time I saw you, not met you, saw you was at a Broadband Institute conference, and so I've been following your work, and I'm glad that Music Canada was able to commission you to look into this issue that's affecting the music industry. So I will definitely touch base with Music Canada.
Awesome.
They will have the more work to do thanks to your work, and so thank you very much, and wishing you the best as we all figure out what is coming next.
Yeah, thank you for this, and have a good weekend.
Okay,
stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kojo. Bye-bye.